How's everyone? Okay. Let us proceed in Genesis chapter 41. In or out? In or out, kids? Okay. Did y'all hear that growing up? In or out? So, story time. My first cousin was like a brother to me growing up. He's 6 months older. He never let me forget it. And so one day we came inside from playing out in the backyard at my mom's house, and she had just made this whole big old pitcher of sweet tea. It's sun tea. You know what that is around here in Georgia? Yeah, so it's been going for a while. And so she brought it inside, threw some ice in there, big old pitcher. And so I'm not a big sweet tea guy, but I wanted some that day. It was cold. And my cousin wanted some too. And so I pulled the big old jar out of the fridge and I set it on the counter and I poured myself a cup. And I put the cup right next to it and then I knocked over the cup by accident and tea went everywhere. Mom is mopping the kitchen floor. And so she's mad. And then my cousin tries to grab the ball jar pitcher of sweet tea and it slips out of his hands. And the whole thing just falls to the ground and just sweet tea is just covering the floor. She just mopped. And it just made it. She was waiting for it. That was her reward for mopping the floor. And so I've never seen, she doesn't get mad often, but I saw her face just get beet red, like a radish. And she just screamed, because a very high-pitched voice, just screamed. And so Derek and I, we just ran out the front of the house and just ran out so we wouldn't get hit. That was great. It was a great day. We still laugh about that. Never seen her get that mad before. I did. I ran, though. I was a lot faster than she was. She knew she couldn't spank me because when she spanked me and I laughed, she was like, okay, well, I guess you're bigger than me, so I can't do that anymore. I go, well, yeah. She turned that ring around, though, and give me a smack. Oh, okay. Got my attention. All right. Good times. Genesis chapter 41, we've got Joseph, our hero of the tale, and he has just revealed that there's going to be 7 good years in Egypt and then 7 years of famine. So he's asking for someone to be put in charge so that they can prepare and lay by in store as they have been prospered, to use our old 1 Corinthians adage. Is that not right? Okay. And so, verse 37, the proposal pleased, you can see it, can't you? This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? We had some discussion last week about whether or not this was one of those things that we sometimes read about foreign kings or Pharaoh, in which they kind of have an idea that the man of God knows God himself. And so we had some discussion about Daniel as well last week. Battery's dead, Chris? Just static? Okay. Well, Vicki can fix it. I have no doubt. Okay. And so, like Daniel, for example, he was a man of God, and he was in Babylon for a good bit, and then Medo-Persian Empire took over, and so on. And so he definitely revealed to the kings of those different empires that God is God. Yahweh, the Jehovah God that we serve, is the God. There's no other ones. Now, we had the whole Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego situation. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, as their Hebrew names. And so we've got them kind of showing those foreign empires that Yahweh is God. So similar situation here, not quite as dynamic as the book of Daniel, but still same thing. They are reflecting God's presence to the rulers of these empires. Then verse 37, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none there is none so discerning and wise as you are. Keeping in mind here, he cleaned himself up from the prison where he was for over 2 years. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. So, I mean, it's a classic tale, isn't it? We've probably heard this 1,000 times growing up, I'd imagine. So this is not news to anybody as far as I know, but this situation is strikingly similar to his situation in Potiphar's house, right? So the captain of the commander of the army of Egypt, that guy saw something in Joseph and his leadership and the fact that God was blessing him throughout his work. And so Pharaoh kind of recognizes that as well. And so the thing that we made reference to about Potiphar's house was that despite his circumstances, he found an opportunity to bless the organization that he was a part of, to kind of use our phraseology for modern context. And the same thing here. He's in the prison, and he's been waiting patiently for this guy to wake up, the cupbearer, and realize, oh yeah, there's that guy that knew my dream, and he told me that I'd be out of here in 3 days. And so that came to pass, and he promptly forgot all about Joseph there in the prison. And so now Pharaoh recognizes that as well. Any thoughts about that little section there? That's kind of our introduction to where we were last week.
So, what about the character of the cupbearer? He forgot about Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So, did he forget because he's ungrateful? Or did he forget until Pharaoh needed an interpreter? Because if the cupbearer had said something earlier, Joseph might not have been where Pharaoh needed him.
I mean, I feel like when the cupbearer, the possibility could be that, I thought about that too. The cupbearer was restored.
Mm-hmm.
So he right to work, and he didn't come to Pharaoh with anything else but what he had to do.
Well, imagine that you're there with that baker guy that was there earlier. His head's gone, right? So you get set back. It's going to be a thing where you're like, well, I mean, I've made a promise I wouldn't forget the Joseph in the prison, but at the same time, my life is saved, my head didn't roll, I got my job back, and then there just so happens that 2 years later there's a dream that someone needs to interpret, and he doesn't remember then. So that might have jogged, like, oh yeah, there was a guy I knew one time 2 years ago in that prison I was in. So we don't have anything else about him in the text at all. But it is an interesting thought. Like sometimes we just get, I mean, have you forgotten somebody or something important because you're just so excited about the opportunity you have in front of you? I know I have. It just goes out of your mind. And no doubt, I didn't think it malicious, just being, just so happens that God gave him a dream 2 years later. All right. I saw a little clip of a John Piper. So remember heard of John Piper before? If you have, put your hand up, just so I have it. All right, all three of us know, 4 of us know who John Piper is.
No, I remember the name, but I
Okay.
remember
Well, he's a pretty well-known scholar, preacher, not from the Church of Christ, of course, but he's got some good stuff, and his opinion on things comes from a scholar's perspective, so I like to see what he thinks or what he was taught and kind of figure out where he's coming from. But there's a quote I saw from him, a little clip of a sermon, and he was talking about, I keep thinking about this, he's talking about the idea of difficulties in our lives. And obviously that makes a situation clearer in Joseph's perspective because not everything was roses. And things will continue to be improving for him, but I mean, obviously, betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, lied about by his master's wife, in prison. He rises through the ranks in prison, of all things, and then is forgotten there for 2 years. And he's talking about kind of experiencing difficulty and grief and loss. And the way he put it, I wouldn't say it this way, but I thought it was an interesting thing for him to say because he is a widower. So he said, when your partner or your spouse's life is taken from you, that's God asking you, do you love your spouse more than you love me? I thought that was a bit kind of a harsh way to say it, but he's experienced it, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And he goes that when you're told by a doctor that you have cancer and you've only got 3 to 6 months left to live, even through chemo, that's God asking you, do you love your own health and your own life more than you love me? And he used a couple other examples where the point is made. And it's a difficult thing to kind of wrestle with in my mind anyway, because, of course, there's no scripture to kind of back that up per se, but that sentiment kind of seems interesting to consider. And so I imagine Joseph in the dark, in this dungeon, in this pit for over 2 years, just hoping that somebody remembers his ability that God gave him. And it doesn't seem like Joseph wavers. We don't have a record of that at all. We just see him being steadfast and patient through these difficult circumstances. So that's just one of those things I thought about and kind of made that connection. And that's why I love Joseph so much, is because you don't see that wavering Abrahamic kind of like, well, I know God said this, but I don't really think maybe he can pull it off, so let me help him out by lying to these kings. Let me help him out by making my own son. Lisa?
Dawn was waving or trying to get your attention.
Oh, hey, Dawn.
This story is about interpreting dreams, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on dream interpretation.
Being a legitimate thing nowadays?
Right, yes.
Yeah, well. Can you guess my thoughts?
I guess so.
So I'm a classic, world-renowned, weird dreamer.
Yes, me too.
My wife has to hear these. Whenever you have a dream and you experience it and you want to tell somebody, you know 5 seconds in, they don't care about your dream. You know, but it's just, yeah. My mother had a book in her little library, and one of the books, it's an old book from like 1900 or something like that. It's an old antique book. My mother's got everything old in the world. There's antiques all over the place. And that book was The Interpretation of Dreams. So I scanned through that thing when I started having vivid, wild dreams. And, well, if you see a fox, well, that means that there's a thief that you're going to encounter the next day or two. Okay, I guess. If you're on a mountaintop, then it means you need a higher perspective. Well, okay, all right, that kind of makes sense. So, yeah, I think this is definitely a thing that God gave Joseph the ability to have. I mean, it's not unlike the gifts of the first century that the church had to kind of establish them and show them a miracle in which they could kind of experience this is God's word, right? I think Joseph's doing that. He's pronouncing who God is by the ability that God gave him for a special time. So I don't think it's legitimate anymore. I can't see a purpose behind it now that we have the word. So that's my position on it.
He rotted in prison if he didn't have that again.
Hey, I had my
What do you want, Lisa?
I want to make the observation that Joseph is probably thinking, hey, this is not my first rodeo.
Okay.
Things have happened to me. God's taken care of me after a while, so we'll just go with the flow. And I think that Piper guy, his...
John Piper? Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of want to think he's putting God in there where God doesn't belong. And maybe his term, after having been through cancer and having a husband that died of cancer, I'm sorry, I didn't put God in the mix except for helping me with my faith and strength to get through it.
Yeah.
He didn't put it on there for...
He wasn't testing you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I wasn't saying that he was right in that.
Oh,
just to be
I
clear.
know
Yeah.
that was, and a lot of people think that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're putting something on God that was
You got a little
intended.
smidgen of that, maybe if you stretch 1 Corinthians to kind of mean what it doesn't really mean there in that context, that it doesn't place anything on you that you're not able to bear. But
Well, if somebody twists
Yeah.
that and actually does help their faith,
yeah, okay.
then, you know. hey,
I think what he
there
was
you
trying to say is that that's how he examines the trials of life. And that helps him to say, well, okay, I need to refocus on what's important here, not my own health, not my circumstance, but focus on God. And that's kind of what Joseph was doing, I see from the text. So, again, I wouldn't say it that way, because that's not my experience, but it is helpful to kind of remember he is our strength. So, appreciate that. Okay. So, Pharaoh, verse 42, took his signet ring, which is what, by the way?
The signet ring.
Okay, signet ring, absolutely. That's a ring that is a signet. But what is, by definition, a signet ring? Symbol of authority, all right, y'all know. It's a signet ring, obviously. Why even ask the question, right, Mona? So, but this is in my mind anyway. I'll share what's in this brain for some reason. Whenever you see an old medieval movie, right, and they've always got the letters that are there. They have the parchment, and they tie it to a raven to be carried. They pour the wax from the candle on there, and they dip their ring in it. Similar, not exactly right, but it's the same idea. Okay. Clothed him in garments of fine linen, which you've got in Egypt, and put a gold chain about his neck. So, symbol of authority, right? All this stuff that's there. There's a couple of jokes in there, but I'll leave them alone. Verse 43, and he made him ride in his second chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee, and thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. So he's making a public display here for all the people to recognize, hey, if you respect Pharaoh, you respect this guy, because he's got something he needs to get accomplished, and so you are at his beck and call. Verse 44, moreover Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, as if he forgot, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So, a bit of hyperbole there, I'm sure, but the same idea is conveyed. Verse 45, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath-Paneah, which is a great, rolls off your tongue name, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, which is interesting. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. So if you get a job by Pharaoh, you get a free wife. How about that? I mean, moving on, verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So, as you may know, math is not my thing. So he was 17 when we first got a record of his date, and now he's 30. So that's obviously 13 or 20, 13 years. Well, you got to, yeah, right? 30 years old. I mean, he's an ancient man now, according to my children. Our kids saw pictures of us when we were 17. He goes, oh, you guys look so old. I'm like, thanks, honey. What do you think of me now? Verse 47, during the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly, which is a weird way to say that in the English, but I mean, that's what it was. And he gathered up all the food of these 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from fields around it. So he is making little strongholds of provisions. Now, what do you reckon the food's going to be? What did you say, Chris? Grain. Okay, you said it in Georgian, so I had to translate it. Grain, right? So what kind of grain? Grain. You got that grain, you know? Less than one syllable. What kind of grain? Wheat, barley, right? Of course, hops. Weren't introduced yet. So here we go. Got one laugh. All right, verse 49. And Joseph stored up grain in abundance. Well, there's the answer right there, isn't it? Like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. So again, hyperbole a little bit, but same idea. He is taking care of business. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore them to him. He called the first one Manasseh, for, he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. Well, that says a whole lot, doesn't it? To me, it does. He's like, well, you know what? Things are good now. God's taking care of me. I've been blessed. I'm making provisions. I've got a son, and Manasseh, he's made me forget all the hardship that I've gone through in these 12 years. The second, hardship. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's going to remember his father's house pretty soon, right? If you know the narrative already, you know he's going to play some tricks on his brothers. Yeah. All right. Second one, he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So that's, I mean, if you're looking for a guy who always sees, it seems, the silver lining in a situation, this is your guy, because he has been through some difficulty, He's got a wife now. Apparently he likes her. He has 2 children with her. And he is now continuing on the promise. If you ever wondered why we have the 12 tribes of Israel, of the nation of Israel, we don't have Joseph in there. We've got Manasseh and Ephraim, right? So his sons carry on that seed line. It's unlike the other brothers who have their own seed lines that come from them, their own families, or clans, if you will. And then you've got Manasseh and Ephraim. They kind of take Joseph's spot here. It's just interesting to me because it's unusual. If you have the 12 and you have these 2 from Joseph, it kind of makes it interesting.
Their mother is an Egyptian.
Well, that's all right.
Daughter of the priest of On. It's a different religion, a different nationality that has been brought into the house of Israel, the Hebrews.
Which is an interesting dynamic because, I imagine Joseph wouldn't be shy about telling the priestess of On who the real God is. I would imagine that. Because when they are made slaves in one more generation, when the Pharaoh rose up in Exodus 1 that didn't know about Jacob and that whole situation, then they were treated just like the other Hebrews were. So, okay. Verse 53, the 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread, because of Joseph being exactly where God needed him to be for this eventuality. Which, again, if you're drawing parallels to other narratives or the stories in Scripture or situations in Scripture, you're thinking of the book of Esther, probably, right? She just happened to be where God happened to need her at the time when the nation was going to be destroyed by a bad guy. Okay, verse 56. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was severe over all the earth. So in case you had in your mind that this famine was just going to be the Egyptian famine, that's not the case. It's all over the place, right? So you have people coming in, like the Midianites before they're called the Midianites, and you have no doubt, you'll know that Joseph's brothers will come to Egypt to buy grain because that's how severe the famine was. Now, we get some interesting small trickery from the brother that was sold as a slave when they wanted to murder him. He is now in charge of Egypt and food. And so Joseph's brothers show up. Now, it's a little bit maybe long-winded if you know the story already. It's a couple of chapters here where he plays some tricks on them. But as we move through these, we'll realize that the maliciousness that I would have had in this situation is not what Joseph has. So let's continue reading here. Chapter 42, verse 1. When Jacob learned, so his daddy, learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" Which is this just the most Jacob thing ever. Like, y'all standing around like there's nothing to do because there's a famine going on. Sure, it hasn't rained in a year, but listen. Why are you looking at one another? He said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt." Now, I wonder how he heard that. It's just, passing travelers say, "Hey, by the way, we got a whole store of bread in Egypt here. Go down, buy grain for us that we may live and not die." Well, that's probably a good thing. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Well, I wonder why he thought that. Poor Benji. Verse 5. Thus the sons of Israel, or Jacob, came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. That term governor, it's not quite right if you know the Hebrew. It's someone who's like a prince, kind of like a judge, someone who's an official. We've already read that he's like second in command in Egypt over this situation, so that's kind of what he is. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land, And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Have you heard of the word irony before? What was the original dream? The grain will bow down before my grain, and here they are. Now, they didn't recognize him, from verse 7. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Which, I mean, I just like that. You know, he's playing a part here. Where do you come from, he said. They said, in the land of Canaan to buy food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. So you could make a little bit of comment here in verse 8. Why wouldn't they have recognized him? Well, they probably thought he was either still a slave or dead. And no doubt he was wearing the Egyptian clothing, so he would have looked different. We've got various records of what the hairstyles were back in the day, and they were not the Hebrews. This is something a little bit different. So they didn't recognize him. And then, verse 9, Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them when he was 17 years old. He said to them, "You are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land, how empty we are." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man," you don't say. "We are honest men," you don't say. "Your servants have never been spies." He says, "That's right." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." They said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers. Well, are you 12? The sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. I mean, it just gets so rich in here that, you know, if you were in this situation, what might you do? If your brothers were going to kill you, and so they threw you in a big old hole, sold you as a slave, you spent at least 2 years in prison for a thing you didn't do, and now your brothers are here, just like you predicted through that dream, bowing down before you. Ta-da, Ted says? Yeah, I mean, it's just, I can't imagine what I would do. I mean, I've not lived through what Joseph lived through, but here they are, his brothers. Here they are. Oh, man. Now you're spies. Verse 15. This day you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes to me. I want to see Benji. Bring him out here. Send one of you, let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. Now, I mean, keeping in mind here, they said Benjamin's back with Dad, and he's asking to see Benjamin, his brother, the son of his mother, right? And he knows if they're telling the truth, he's going to see Benjamin again, which is cool for Joseph, because he's been, again, at least 12 years here without seeing his own family members. Now, here they are bowing down before him like he predicted. But if that's not true, by the life of Pharaoh, what might happen to his brothers? I mean, yeah, by the life of Pharaoh, they're dead. So, and then verse 17, he put them all together in custody for 3 days. Because, I mean, that must have felt like something. Because, hey, you know what? Just to make sure that you're telling the truth, let's just lock you up for 3 days in a dungeon where I've spent more than 2 years. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. Now, what's the name of God there? It's Adonai, but it should be Yahweh. Often the scribes, when they would write this over again, they wouldn't put in Yahweh because they can't write that name and then have to go and take a bath and change your clothes and get a new quill or whatever, right? So that's the deal. So they put Adonai there to kind of be safe. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. Let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, you shall not die. They did so. And then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. This is why this distress has come upon us. I mean, this is Shakespearean, isn't it? They're like, man, you know what? We wouldn't be in this situation If when our brother in the pit begged us to let him go, we did that. This is our just deserts. Whatever in the world that means. And Reuben answered them, Did I not tell you not to sin against the boy, but you did not listen? Now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They're still got this cloud of guilt over what they did, which I think is good, right? There's that conscience thing within you, buried deep inside. Do you have that too? Conscience? Feel bad about doing bad things? Yeah. They still have that, which is good. They weren't hardened to that experience and owning their mistake, at the very least, here in this text. Okay, so then they did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. So he even sets the stage even deeper for us. When he would stand before his own brothers, he knew their language because they grew up in the same household. But he's using an interpreter to speak Egyptian to them, and then he understands what they're saying, which is it's just great. He turned away from them and he wept. So hearing that they were still bothered by what they did to him, the guy they were talking to without them knowing it, caused that compassion to come out. He returned to them, spoke to them. He took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. So he's not even taking their money, which is, it's just Joseph, right? Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. He said to his brothers, My money has been put back, but here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this, their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, What is this that God has done to us? When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that happened to them, saying, The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us, took us to be spies of the land, but we said to him, We are honest men, we have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father, one is no more. The youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take grain for the famine of your households and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob said, their father said to them, You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. Now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. So he's thinking the worst. And he has every right to. Jacob, if nothing else, has had a wild ride of a life. And here he is, an old man with his sons, trying to provide for them in a famine. He's lost two. He's losing his youngest. Reuben said to his father, Kill my two sons if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, I will bring him back to you. So good guy Reuben here. What's that? Well, he's trying to be, Yeah, I will bring Benjamin back. Yeah. There's a couple of things kind of like this in Scripture where you're like, why would you offer that? Well, not good enough. Grandpa wouldn't kill these two little kids, but he's just trying to make a point, right? He said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead. He's the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you're about to make, you would bring my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. So there's our fourth pit, right? So Sheol, the land of the dead, the grave, the pit, the void, the emptiness. If you read Ecclesiastes, you're familiar with Sheol. And so here's the fourth time that we have this mentioned here. Okay, questions, comments, additions, thoughts? Again, if you think this is a wild ride so far, it gets even wilder as Joseph takes his revenge in a very peaceful, playful way. Okay, in case you forgot, verse 1, Now the famine was very severe in the land. When they had eaten the grain that they brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. If you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' Israel," Jacob said, "why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?" Like, why did you reveal that information? Can't you keep your mouth shut? They replied, "The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, 'Is your father still alive?'" So Joseph's kind of getting some intel here, like, is Dad still alive? "Do you have another brother? Is he still doing okay? Is Benji all right?" What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, "Bring your brother down"? And Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy with me. We will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and also our little one." So they have their own families, obviously. "I will be a pledge for his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever," as if he was innocent of Joseph's blood, right? "If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice." Dad, if you would just let us go, we'd be up back already, you know? Their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags. Carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts," I mean, just the greatest treats ever, "and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of the sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight." I mean, Jacob has learned some lessons along the way. Now, there's this line I remember from back in the day, from verse 11, "a little balm and a little honey." So what does all this represent?
You're going to make Joseph look more favorably and more kindly.
Sweetening the pot.
Sweetening the pot, yeah.
It's not a bribe, just a little gift. A little gift. Hey,
Token of appreciation.
yeah, I appreciate you guys, you know. You got the food, we got the money, here's a little balm, a little honey. You know, maybe we can make something work here. Gabagool, as they all say. I don't know. This is, all right. Anyway, take your brother, arise, go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother in Benjamin. So, are you getting the picture that he's still there in custody? As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So it is what it is what he said. So the men took this present. They took double the money with them in Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. Joseph saw Benjamin with them. He said to the steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal, and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." Dun, dun, dun. They go back to get some more food and to see their brother, who they don't recognize, who's in charge of Egypt. So we'll pause here for the morning. Again, you have Joseph here in a position where easily he could have his brothers executed and no one would blink an eye because he is second in command in Egypt. But that's not the Joseph that we know. So he's a good example for us, obviously, to restrain ourselves, have that forgiveness, have that mercy, compassion that we know that our Lord had as well when he was on the earth. So we'll pause here for the morning, pick up here, and finish the ride hopefully next week. I do want to continue the life of Joseph until Jacob, spoiler alert, does die, because the brothers still want to know if Joseph's really forgiven them or moving on. That's the point I really want to make at the very, very end of his life. And then we'll go on from that and try to answer some of your questions. We've got a lot of the survey questions still. The big topic that people have been requesting is talking about women of the Bible, which, fair enough, we talk about guys a whole lot, but there are some very impressive women of faith, and so we'll make a catalog of individuals that you want to talk about and talk about their lives as well. I'm not quite ready for a big book study yet. It's time to go to the New Testament. We had minor prophets, and I'm here in Revelation, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Because Revelation is also a ride that you have to kind of be totally on board with. If you really want that study, let me know. If you're not interested, also let me know. My email, cell phone, all work. So anyway, that's the plan for right now. Thank you guys for your attention this morning. We'll be dismissed for about 18 minutes before worship begins.